In 1965, a young man named Morris, beat old, crept into a hole with an impasse 44 years after the fact. History rehashed the same thing with clinical understudy John Jones, who became caught topsy-turvy inside a tight entry, turning into dead end. Both of these mishaps share comparable causes, which we have nitty-gritty in our past recordings. For each situation, the men made a similar basic blunder, slithering directly into the obscure. Consider the possibility that investigating underground cavern by creeping in feet initially could forestall such occurrences. Here, at the terrifying, we disclose the holding story of Neil Greenery, a 20-year elderly person who slipped into a dull, choking out shaft with his feet first. The result, in any case, was not true to form. Neil's process took a nerve-wracking turn as he became wedged in a deceptive, unfamiliar passage. As time passes, salvage groups combat against the harsh dimness and gooey mud, engraving a strong update in history of the innate perils hiding underneath the world's surface. On Sunday Walk 22, 1959, a gathering of 8 cavers set out on a trying endeavor into Pinnacle Sinkhole, famous caverns sitting above Castleton in Derbyshire, Britain. Among them was Oscar Hackett. Neil Greenery, a 20-year-old truth-seeker at Bale School, Oxford. Known for his energy for investigation, he was joined by individuals from the English Speleological Association, partaking in the fervor of the endeavor. Their objective was to dive into a section found roughly a portion of a mile from the cavern entrance, pushing the limits of the known framework, and to examine a fissure found 2 weeks earlier in a side chamber. Admittance to the cavern presented its own arrangement of difficulties, plunging around 1,000 ft underneath the ground through a maze of mystery caves. After entering the caverns, faced the imposing Dirty Duck segment, exploring a tight, wet press burrow that, especially after precipitation, frequently loaded up with water. This prompted the rock entry, a nearly simpler area. However, it requested arranging a progression of sporadic impediments, roughly 150 m, into the section A3M hop on the north mass of the upper exhibition. Looked for them on one side, high over a precarious, sloppy scree. Pickering entry, a drawn-out thin creep requiring a blend of bowing and F-length, moving it closed, with an abnormal curve and a sloppy sump over the eye hole sufficiently huge to oblige a human body, denoted the following test: past a thigh profound sloppy pool. The section comes full circle in quite possibly of the best enhanced chamber, stalagmite chamber, currently known as Greenery Chamber. Neil was very much aware of the chamber and the baffling tight shaft that had been recently found. He was unable to contain his expectation to witness the stunning chamber and investigate the fissure. As the group entered the cavern, it requested more than an hour of serious elbowing, creeping, and climbing. This was no standard outing. It was a difficult experience at the 0ft subterranean, requiring critical energy and exertion. After arriving at the assigned chamber, they went for an opportunity to stroll around and wonder about the regular magnificence encompassing them in spite of their weakness from the burdensome slithering. The gathering enthusiastically moved toward the fissure in the ground. The entry to the fura was open enough for a typical individual to go through, estimating around 1 m by 70 cm. Interest consumed Neil as he contemplated what lay past the entry. Nobody had wandered right down the shaft, yet they assessed its profundity to be roughly 40 ft. The shaft draped somewhat off vertical for 12 ft, followed by a difficult wind tool contort, prompting a 10 t long slope beading plane, and afterward a further upward 18 t drop around 3:30 p.m. The gathering brought down an adaptable sided stepping stool that is utilized to get to bound spaces and hard to arrive at areas. Greenery started his plummet into the obscure, moving and crawling his direction down. He wasn't gotten with a sound, as it was accepted that the limitation of the gap would keep him from sliding down. Soon after starting his drop, he experienced an unbelievably restricted, bound and claustrophobic wind tool pressure. in spite of the difficulties he figured out how to explore. Through it, feeling a feeling of achievement, yet he was not mindful of the following couple of feet. All through his plummet, he kept up with consistent correspondence with the group, guaranteeing them that everything was continuing as expected. After effectively arranging the wine tool contour greenery, accessed the rest of the shaft. As he proceeded with his plunge, he started to feel anomalies with his balance. At first he might have accepted he could move around them as he had in the wine tool segment. After some time endeavoring to advance, he, at last, understood that a rock was discouraging his way, understanding that he was unable to unstick the stone and move inside the bound space. He settled on the hard decision to move back up. Tragically, greenery found himself unfit to lift his feet adequately to climb the stepping stool. He became sandwiched in a curved fissure, just 18 in wide, and shouted to the others for help. The cut was somewhat more extensive than a 15 in PC, notwithstanding their endeavors to lift Neil a couple of feet by pulling on the stepping stool. It became stuck between the cavern surface in greenery's body. His sobs for help reverberated from the profundities of the opening as he found wound up, caught unfit to move in either course. Troubles, for example, these are normal in buckling, and at first greenery's friends expected that salvage would be a direct matter of bringing ropes and pulling him down to somewhere safe. However, soon they understood the earnestness of the circumstance. A light handline was brought down to help his return, yet a few endeavors to pull him up with ropes finished in disappointment, with each rope snapping or shearing on the stone-ed edge. This logical prompted alarm in greenery, and as he endeavored to move up, he turned out to be solidly stopped just underneath the wine tool, unfit to twist his legs to grasp the stepping stool or flex his elbows to rise further. He wound up in trouble. Perceiving the earnestness of the circumstance, a portion of the cavers left to look for extra assistance inside the space of hours. Volunteers from across Britain combined on Pinnacle Cave, driven by a common assurance to free the caught Neil. Many workers alongside help from the illustrious Flying Corps, police, and surprisingly, the naval force revitalized to join the salvage endeavors. Only a couple of hours after Neil became caught, the heroes experienced one more unanticipated hindrance. At this point, the climate in the shaft had become seriously dirtied, with greenery's body removing the wind current. His confusion became clear, and his way of behaving developed progressively. Silly observers depicted him as less helpful, apparently uninterested about the seriousness of his circumstance, and in any way event, proposing to others that they leave and snatch a feast. Experienced cavers were dispatched down the shaft to arrive at Neil greenery, yet individually they were driven once again by the poisonous air. 3 of the workers passed out while endeavoring the plummet. At last, the 4th worker, Ron Peters, figured out how to tie down a rope around greenery's chest. After beginning to pull, they understood that this main demolished his breathing challenges. Expression of his situation spread quickly through neighboring towns. Prepared cavers, famous for their boldness and cleverness, hurried to top cave furnished with ropes, breathing apparatuses, and shoddy cots not set in stone to explore the hazardous shaft. However, the drop demonstrated tiring. The thin section, hardly more extensive than a shoulder, wandered aimlessly, setting off sensations of claustrophobia. The air, spoiled with Neil's exhalations, attacked their lungs and blurred their vision. Individually, they arose crushed, panting for natural air. Their eyes reamed and stinging. The regal Flying Corps carried oxygen chambers and concentrated hardware to the scene when a conveyance of oxygen tanks showed up at 12:30 a.m. There was trust that it would resuscitate greenery and work with his salvage, albeit the air quality, hardly further developed, it stayed lacking. It was chosen to keep siphoning oxygen over the course of the night, with plans to send in a deft, experienced caver fit for exploring the limited shaft first thing. In the early hours of the second day, 18-year-old June Bailey, not entirely settled to dive into the profundities, she proposed breaking greenery's collarbones if important, to free his shoulders and make sufficient room to haul him out. Yet even the endeavors of the unbelievable Bailey and different workers were upset by the harmful vapor, driving them once again by early Monday evening, almost 24 hours since Greenery had entered the cavern. His toiled breathing might in any case be heard in spite of the frantic circumstance. The not entirely settled to endure compacted air chambers were used trying to clean the foul air off of the shaft. The walls, stepping stool and rope were covered in mud clouding Greenery's area. Everything that can possibly be seen was a sloppy blockage far underneath. With Greenery solidly stuck in an enduring position, one arm constrained into a break under a stepping stool rung in a medieval endeavor to free himself. In the meantime, the ceaseless downpour took steps to flood the Dirty Ducks area of Pinnacle Cave. As a careful step, it was encouraged to pull out. For everybody's well-being, once the downpour dialed down, joined by ARAF specialist who had joined the salvage exertion, they got back to the top of the shaft where they had last heard Greenery breathing. However, this time, there was no strong Neil. Greenery was proclaimed dead on Tuesday, Walk 24th at 1959. Dr. Hugh Kidd depicted the experience as the solitary time he had announced passing, without really seeing the patient, all through the difficulty. Greenery's dad, Eric Greenery, held up at the passage entrance. It was he who mentioned that his child's body be left set up before any other individual put their life in danger, lives in opposition to prevalent thinking. The lower piece of the shaft was fixed with free shakes gathered from the chamber floor, not with concrete as frequently revealed. The once very much improved chamber that housed the small shaft at last became Neil Greenery's last resting place. The tale of Neil Greenery caught overall consideration, standing out as truly newsworthy, and papers across America, Australia, and the UK today. The stalagmite chamber is named Greenery Chamber in memory of the gallant youthful cav who unfortunately lost his life